Pressure is growing on President Trump to resign after Wednesday's act of domestic terrorism on the Capitol. Some of Mr. Trump's most ardent defenders in the media are backing those calls. The Wall Street Journal's editorial board says the president should step down now to, quote, spare the U.S. another impeachment fight. But that could be where the country is headed. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer are both demanding the president resign, or for Vice President Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove the president from office. If they refuse to act, lawmakers are expected to draft articles of impeachment. For more on all of this, I want to bring in Brian Kalt from East Lansing, Michigan. He's a constitutional law professor at Michigan State University. He's also the author of Unable: The Law, Politics, and Limits of Section 4 of the 25th Amendment. Professor Kalt, welcome. Great to have you with us. So Section 4 of the 25th Amendment has never been invoked before, although other sections of the 25th Amendment have. But now that there are reports it's being discussed, Section 4, lay out the process of how the vice president and the cabinet could use it to remove the president from office.
Well, it wouldn't remove him from office. Technically, it would just strip him of his powers. And Section 4 does have a process for him to take those powers back. At this late date, it probably wouldn't happen. But when the vice president and a majority of the cabinet declare that the president is unable to discharge his powers and duties, power transfers immediately to the vice president. And if the president comes back and says, no, I'm not unable, I'm fine, that starts the process. But the vice president stays in charge during that dispute resolution process. So the vice president and cabinet would have 4 days to object. If they do, it will go to Congress. Congress has 21 days to deliberate. During that time, during that 4-day wait, during the 21-day deliberation, the vice president remains in charge.
So, as you know, President Trump's term runs out in 12 days. Would that even be enough time to go through this process?
Theoretically, they could run out the clock. If the House and Senate don't vote before the 20th, then the clock would run out and he would never take power back. But if either the House or the Senate vote before the 20th and don't get the 2/3 majority that they need to keep the president out, then he would retake power immediately at that point. So you would need either 2/3 in both chambers, which is a tall order, or you would need the leadership, Pelosi and McConnell, and enough members to support just sort of slow walking the process and not taking that vote.
So Democrats are saying that they will draft articles of impeachment if the president doesn't resign, or if the cabinet and Vice President Pence don't invoke Section 4 of the 25th. Now, tell us about what this would mean for his future political prospects. If you are removed due to Section 4 of the 25th Amendment, can you run for president again if you've only served one term?
Absolutely. The sidelining of a president under the 25th Amendment doesn't affect his ability to do anything. He could run again. And if he's impeached and convicted, then there's the possibility that the Senate, after convicting, could impose an additional consequence of disqualification, and that would prevent him from running for president ever again.
So quickly explain to our viewers the other sections of the 25th Amendment, what they refer to and how they've been used before.
Yeah, it's funny. People talk about the 25th Amendment. Usually they mean Section 4, which is the only part that's never been used. Section 1 says when the president dies or resigns or is removed after an impeachment and conviction, the vice president becomes president, not just acting president. Section 2 provides a process for filling a vice presidential vacancy. If there's no vice president, the president can nominate someone. They get confirmed by the House and the Senate, and then we fill that vacancy. And that was used when Nixon was president and Agnew resigned. And then when Ford became president, he had to appoint a new vice president. And then Section 3 is for incapacity. But there, unlike Section 4, where it's done without the president's consent, Section 3 allows the president to hand over power to the vice president and then take it back just on his own say-so. So it's much easier for the president to take power back under Section 3. And that's been used 3 times for presidents being sedated for surgical procedures, or most recently for colonoscopies.
Makes total sense. All right. So while I have you, though, Professor, I do want to ask you about pardons. So a little pivot for a moment. The New York Times reports President Trump is said to have discussed pardoning himself in the final days of his term. Is that a power he possesses? And if he does, can he issue a blanket pardon that would protect him from any prosecution for crimes he may have committed while in office?
Well, the power to issue a blanket pardon, a preemptive pardon, even if he hasn't been charged, that's more clear. There's precedent for that. But a self-pardon is problematic. It's not clear that the president can pardon himself. There are very good arguments on saying that he can't. If I do say so myself, I was one of the first people to write about this back in the 90s. There are arguments on the other side, too. And there aren't any cases. We don't have any examples. So he can try. The prosecution would not just give up. They would test it. They would say the pardon's not valid. And then we would have a test case, and the courts would have to figure it out.
All right, great, thank you. And really quickly, do you think it is likely, though, that Section 4 of the 25th Amendment will be invoked here, considering everything that we discussed?
It doesn't seem like it. It looked on Wednesday like they were talking about it, but things seem to have cooled down since then, and it's really a big step to take. It can be used in situations where the president is running amok, but really it's about a president who's in a coma. That's what it's designed to handle easily. So unless things really start to spiral out of control, I don't see it being invoked.
All right. Well, Professor Brian Kalt, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your legal expertise.
Thanks for having me.